what is it already used, and how is it functioning? And we will also have a little bit a look in the future, like how could AI help in the future multilateral negotiations? And to set the stage for our conversation, it's my pleasure to invite Dr. Anurabha Ghosh to deliver a short keynote. Mr. Ghosh is an internationally recognized public policy expert, author, columnist, and institution builder. He's the founder and CEO of the Council on Energy, Environment, and Water, which he has led into the top ranks of Asia's policy research institution and among the world's leading climate think tanks. Among many roles, the government of Brazil has appointed him special envoy for the COP30 climate negotiations, and he also chairs the AI and climate expert group for the 2026 AI Impact Summit. It's a pleasure to have you here, and I think he's one of the best experts to talk now about climate negotiation and also some pain points. Over to you.
Gunda, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. And let me first start by thanking the organizers for not just organizing this session, but to many arms of the German federal government that have come together. I was just asking them offline who all have been working on this issue. And you'll hear, of course, much more about this. But Dr. Ilya Niklet and Mr. Yannick Sussman, thank you very much for joining me. And good afternoon, everyone. This is the first day of the AI Impact Summit, and we are already into the most controversial part, at least when it comes to climate negotiations. Not for any other reason except climate negotiations are perhaps one of the most complex multilateral decision-making processes in operation today. Why? Because it's not just about the climate. It's about the economy, it's about trade, it's about investment, it's about technology, and increasingly, it is about geopolitics. So when you enter a negotiating room at a COP, the process can feel extremely intimidating. I remember going to my first COP more than 15, 16 years ago, and just wondering, how do I even make sense of this? I was not a negotiator, but even to understand what was going on, to distill it, and then communicate it to the world outside, it was difficult. The process is structurally dense because there are multiple negotiating tracks. There's adaptation, mitigation, finance, technology, means of implementation, increasingly new issues, just transition, carbon markets, etc. The challenge here is not just that these are individual silos, but their intersections also become more complex. And it becomes, it compounds the challenge because there's an asymmetry in the analytical capacity that negotiating delegations have. Larger delegations distribute the technical, legal, and strategic analysis across different teams. Smaller delegations from poorer countries do not have that luxury. The issue is therefore of unequal bandwidth to interpret the evolving negotiation space. Now, in this context, it is not just access to information, access to the text that matters. The real asymmetry is in access to interpretive capacity. What does a particular phrase, what does a comma and a full stop and a semicolon really translate into what it would mean for our economic circumstances, for access to technology, for access to finance? And even more so, as the global geopolitical situation becomes more complex, how do we deal with the recurring fault lines that already exist in more than 30 years of the climate regime, but with also accounting for new fault lines that are emerging, and yet try to find ways in which we can bridge those divides? Of course, some of this is dependent on our evolving economic structures, on our bilateral relations, on our plurilateral relations, which can then reflect in the multilateral negotiation. But the role of AI-driven interpretive capacity can significantly, at least in theory, shrink the time and the brain space and the bandwidth that is needed for a negotiator who's already under pressure. The last point I want to make is that this is not just about climate negotiations. I did my PhD on international trade and trade negotiations, and I recall more than about 20 years ago, similar challenges emerging when countries had to show up in Geneva, the WTO, to try and make sense of what opportunities there were or not. We could see similar issues maybe on maritime negotiations, on aviation negotiations, on international financial negotiations. The central operational challenge is that this is about text, about time, and about political alignment. The cycles within which political alignment has to work out are perhaps different from the time horizons within which we're exploring alternative scenarios for negotiation outcomes, and yet bring it down to the real-time issues of the actual texts that are under development. That means we need real-time insights, we need to summarize, but we also need to make sure that the language we use, the idioms we use, the interpretation we use in our local context is enabled by AI tools and not disabled by prejudices that might have gone into the AI models. So I would very much welcome initiatives like this and would love to hear a lot more of not just how this tool has been developed, or Negotiate COP, but how do we actually put it into practice in the real world? How do we reduce the trust deficit that exists in the real world, in the real negotiating chambers, through such tools? How do we ensure that the trust deficit does not widen? How do we ensure that representation and access results in real equity when it comes to the opportunities that are presented with a changing climate and a changing economy? With those words, thank you again. It's a full room. I'm sure there's a lot more you wish to hear and learn from, and look forward to your provocations. Thank you again for having me, and let's move forward between the artificial intelligence world and our own sometimes not too intelligent world when it comes to dealing with the climate. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for this excellent overview, and I think we have now an understanding how complex negotiations are. And we are lucky here, I'm happy here to have two data scientists with me. On my left side, Dr. Ilya Nickel, Chief Data Scientist of the Data Lab of the BMZ, which is the development ministry in Germany, and also to my left, Yannick Sassmann, Data Scientist in this Data Lab at BMZ. And they will present Negotiate COP, what this tool is about and how it actually helps with these challenges, or we will also discuss maybe what were challenges while doing this or while developing this tool. So I would like to hand over now to Yannick so that you learn more about Negotiate COP.
Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone, and many thanks to Dr. Ghosh for the insights on the negotiation process and setting the scene for our discussion. Many thanks also to the organizers for organizing this event, and also to every one of you to participate today and join us in talking about how open source AI can democratize multilateral negotiations. As Gunder said, my name is Yannick Sassmann. I'm a data scientist in the Economic Cooperation Ministry within Germany, and I'm here on behalf of three data labs of the German Federal Ministry. That's namely the Foreign Ministry, that's the Environment Ministry, that's the Economic Cooperation Ministry, and that's also our implementing agency, GIZ, who developed this tool as a whole-of-government approach together. The objective that I have today is I want to demonstrate to you the potential of jointly developed digital public goods, or AI commons in this conference terms, as a new form of international cooperation that distributes the benefits of technological progress more equitably. And in order to convince you of that potential, I would like to first show you what Negotiate COP actually is. Secondly, I want to tell you a little bit about the technical architecture and our conceptual framework that we used in order to set up the tool and how it was perceived by actual negotiators at the COP30. And lastly, I want to help you understand how or promote the co-development of digital public goods and AI commons as a means to increase the access to AI and redistribute and democratize the power. As Dr. Gosh said, it's about the information asymmetry that's being addressed with the AI and through access through AI. And now I would like to introduce you to Negotiate COP, and AI might not only be the better negotiator, but maybe also the better presenter. So I have a little video for you with an AI-generated voice. And there we go.
Negotiate COP gives delegates and negotiators quick and easy access to key information from official UNFCCC submissions. Use AI-assisted tools designed to make your negotiations faster and more focused. Explore over 600 official submissions from COP29, COP30 and their subsidiary bodies, all directly sourced from the UNFCCC portal. Instantly extract the main asks, compare positions between parties, and navigate complex documents with clarity and speed. Using the Submissions Explorer, analyze submissions by individual delegations or groups of states. Find your issue and submitter of interest, then apply smart features to view key asks and positions. The Position Comparison feature offers a structured overview of similarities and contradictions between two submissions. It lets you compare side by side where two parties align or diverge. Use the portal chat to ask targeted questions and receive sourced AI-generated insights from all included submissions with direct access to original sources. Negotiate COP is an open digital public good available to all delegations equally. We prioritize privacy. We do not store, track, or log any user input. No personal or sensitive data are collected. Additionally, the app is hosted on German servers that are powered entirely by renewable energy. With Negotiate COP, we want to contribute to fairer and more equitable COP negotiations. Discover a smarter way to negotiate at negotiatecop.org.
Perfect. And don't worry, we don't only have a marketing video, but Negotiate COP is actually live and up and running. It's freely available on the internet. I see someone already pulling it up. Very good. I will also, whoever's interested, we launched it for the COP30. It's been tested there. Whoever's interested, I have the QR code in the presentation at the end for everyone to also give it a try after the presentation and the panel discussion. After this introduction into the application, I would now like to delve into the technical architecture and the setup or the conceptual framework that we actually used. So our first feature is the Submission Explorer. It extracts key asks and fixed positions from countries. And key asks are the main demands or objectives that certain countries put forward. And fixed positions, on the other hand, they are firmly stated stances or boundaries, so something that countries insist on or will not compromise on. You're probably asking yourself, how do we identify these certain phrases? And we definitely use language, and we use a large language model. We've identified certain detection word or action words for the key asks, so the main demands, it's must, should, need not, ensure, or provide, something along those lines. Whereas for the fixed positions, it's more restrictive language, such as must not, shall not, cannot, unacceptable, for instance. So that's a little bit the framework and the thinking that we've done in order to categorize all of the country positions. More now for the technical people among you guys, a little bit of a technical architecture. So we have the scraper on the one side that downloads actually all of the documents and all of the positions, all of the PDFs from the official UNFCCC website. We then put it in our database. We have an ETL manager, so extract, transform, and load, that actually extracts all of the metadata, the smart features, and the indication of alignment, puts that back into our backend. And then we have the two user-facing applications, the one of them being a rec, the other one being like the website and the portal chat and the submission explorer and the position comparison tool. Now onwards to our second feature, that's the position comparison tool. And here it allows you to compare the positions of the negotiation parties side by side. And if we scroll down a bit, the video will do it in a second, we can actually see the analytical part behind Negotiate COP. And here the LLM provides an indication of alignment between the two positions. And how that works, as you can see, first of all, it's a 3-step decision process, basically. So the LLM first looks at whether or not it has enough good quality information to make a valid assessment. It then, as a second step, looks at whether or not there are any contradictions between the positions. We actually worked with actual climate negotiators to come up with that taxonomy, looking at where the conflict types usually lie. And as you can see, I mean, as in every negotiation, it's about timing, it's about instruments, it's about financing, and the LLM actually judges whether or not there are any contradictions between the fixed positions and the key asks of each of those countries. Questions later, please. And then lastly, we have the measuring or an indication of similarity, where the LLM actually looks at whether or not there are any similarities between the key asks. And here we also came up with analytical dimensions, so to say. You can see them here down there. It's goals, it's instrument, it's timelines, it's financing that then are being displayed. And lastly, we do have the portal chat. Given the time, I won't go into much detail here. It's a simple RAG application, so retrieval augmented generation, meaning chatting with your documents. I mean, giving your attendance in the conference today, I'm certain that you've heard about the technology. So yeah, that's a little bit the last feature that we have. So how was Negotiate COP actually perceived at the COP 30? In terms of expectation management, this is the first prototype. We've developed it last year and we launched and tested it at the COP 30. We've experienced a widespread interest across all delegations in using AI. Dr. Gosch put it forward, it's such a heavy process, it's so fast-paced that everyone is arching for some relief through some automatic information processing. And our main target group that we identified are young negotiators that might be new to the COP process but are very used to working with AI. Challenges that we faced are that in these fast-paced environments, the usability of these tools is key because no one has time to actually interact and do a training and everything. It needs to be as user-friendly as possible. And the other thing is that so far in our tests, AI can mainly support the factual part of the negotiation, so the information processing. But the main, at the core of the negotiations are relationship building, trust building, and everything we do as humans. And that's something that AI so far can't substitute for. And as I work in development cooperation and build similar AI systems more or less on a daily basis, I want to leave you with a little bit of food for thought. Along with the timely conference and theme of this conference, we see a concentration of power in AI in terms of access, data, talent, and compute. And I probably don't tell you anything new here, and this will be iterated again and again over the next couple of days at this conference. But what I wanted to show you today is how digital public goods and AI commons like Negotiate COP embody the democratization of digital infrastructure. They are public, they're accessible, they are co-designed to reduce information asymmetry. And in this spirit, this is one concrete example of how open digital public goods can contribute to distributing technological progress more broadly by broadening access to AI. And I'm becoming more and more convinced that the digital world is partly governed, but mainly built. I mean, we write international law together, we finance and implement joint initiatives together. So why not develop and co-develop digital public goods together as a new form of international cooperation through co-design, co-development, and equal access that benefits everyone. And now I'm looking forward to the discussion. I promised you the QR code. If you're interested in collaborating with us, we're happy to work with you. Just reach out via the email address. And here's the QR code for you. I see all of the good phones going up for you to try it yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yannick. But to the audience, please test the tool after the session, so not now, huh? In case there are any questions, we will have a Q&A afterwards, but I would like first to kick off the discussion here, and then you are happy to ask your questions, and the speakers will stay here also afterwards. Yeah, I would like to pick up some words that were mentioned here. So we heard a lot about this trust issue and power dynamics and information asymmetry. What if these tools are used in a wrong way? Like now we're speaking about open source AI, but imagine, like could you also give us the other way, or what should we be aware of when using AI for multilateral climate negotiations?
Yes, that is a very important question. Also, motivation why we started building open tools, of course. If the current race for stronger and stronger AI models goes on, then of course the next step would be that you use this as an advantage in discussions and preparing for your positions and in negotiations. So if that happens, then suddenly the access to those very strong models becomes a form of power. And I think that part of the bet that the world currently bets on in these large models is aiming at that, precisely as that, using LLMs for, of course, for the purpose of nations. So what we did here is to use an open weight model, open source model actually, use a public good, develop a public good that's open sourced, to do the opposite, just to give you a tool to prepare, especially those who do not have the delegation to it by themselves. I cannot really say what the future will be like, just that we should definitely take care to find an equilibrium between the development of which is costly, of course, of new models, and to make them open as possible and available to everyone.
Thank you very much. I would also like to ask Arunaba, how do you see, like, when you negotiate, like, what is the current state? How do you see digitalization at the moment there? How do you see AI models used? And what future do you envision? Like, concretely, do you think these tools are useful? What could be potential feedback? Could you please share a little bit from your experience on the ground?
So think of it this way. I'm not passing judgment whether this is going to be good or bad. I think it'll depend on the use case. But think of it this way. If you were a tennis player trying to get into Wimbledon, and say you grew up somewhere in the United States, very likely you're going to end up somewhere in Florida where a lot of tennis players go for training. If you're a tennis player from India, maybe you will also end up there if you had your private resources. Maybe you will not. This is really, so even if you got a wild card entry, the point is when you're entering the championship, you're already entering with unequal kind of resources behind you. It's much less about what you do on the court. It's a lot about what you've done before. What you could potentially do with tools like this is fill the gap of the back end that you don't have, but also in real time. So imagine your coach is now whispering in your ear as you're playing. That's theoretically what could be possible, which is why just understanding and synthesizing the texts as they come out and understanding to what extent you talked about it, in terms of, what are the fixed positions and what are the variable positions. When we do analysis, similarly at CW, we look at What are the red lines across delegations? What are, open suggestions? Where might be in negotiating terms zones of possible agreement, right? So we do this manually across our negotiation team, and you can do it faster. But there are a few other things that can actually also happen. Number one, you mentioned this yourself. If we deployed this correctly, it opens up time for the negotiator to build those interpersonal relationships as well. Ultimately, negotiations, especially in international arenas, are about handshakes, because we don't have a world government. Enforcement is also dependent on moral suasion. So deepening those personal relationships matter. The second thing is, often, and I have observed this a lot, negotiators, especially in developing countries, are often unaware of a lot of the financial and technological developments that might even be happening even within their countries or their geographies. Because there's a negotiation story, and then there is a decarbonization story that is playing out. Can we evolve these tools a little bit more so they get access not just to the texts, but they get access to, if I'm looking for, 50% reduction in storage costs, is that an impossibility, or somewhere the technology is developing so I can factor that in when I'm thinking about negotiations? Third, and related to this, we increasingly see that climate negotiations are not just about what's happening in the negotiating chamber. We talk about the non-state actors, whether they're from the private sector, whether they're from civil society. In the physical world of the negotiation, these are different zones. There's the blue zone and the green zone and the negotiation zone. And the closed door rooms and their open door rooms. In the digital space, those boundaries could be blurred. You can draw on the power of the private sector. You could conceive and play out scenarios of new coalitions that your private sector and your civil society could strike with others technically on the other side of the negotiating table. I think deployed correctly, as I mentioned in my opening remarks as well, we can begin to see new bridges that could be created. Deployed poorly, like with anything with the digital divide, it could end up simply solidifying the divides that already exist. So the jury is out.
Thanks, and I would like to pick this up directly. Like, how do you, with Negotiate COP, make sure that it's supported correctly? What is your user feedback, and are only Germans using it? And how do you make sure that not only Germans use it? Could you elaborate a little bit?
Absolutely, and I mean that's part of the access equation basically. First of all, it's through outreach. We were present at COP30 and demonstrated the tool there. So the marketing aspect, like you said, Dr. Roche, that people need to be aware that the solution exists. But underneath of that, there are loads of values that need to guide the development process in order for other countries to find the trust in using the tool. Because, I mean, it's an international process. Why would the German government just freely give away the technology? So there is some mistrust that you need to counter, basically. And you do that through embodying certain values in your development process. First of all, the main and I think most important value is the openness. So it needs to be open to all delegates. It's open source developed. We use open weights models. And that's the next step. It needs to be openly published as an open source tool so that everyone can verify the technical architectures, backdoors if you wanted to, there are none, and also the database. The second one is also the trustworthiness and the quality of information. That's so whatever the LLM puts out needs to be true for this trust and the trustworthiness to work. Otherwise, the tool doesn't have any use, or it will reflect badly on whoever developed the tool or the German government. So the trustworthiness is the second value that really guided us through the development process. So we only use documents from the UNFCCC website, and we put the guide rails for the LLM are quite conservatively set. If you use the tool, you might see a lot of NAs. That's not because the tool isn't working, but it's working as intended, because we don't want to give out poor quality information that might not be true. So our LLM and our model needs to be not 100% certain, but needs to be quite certain that the information provided is correct. And the last one, the third value that guided the development process was the privacy, because we don't want to track anyone's login data. We don't want to store or track any of the personal data, any requests whatsoever, and we don't do that. Because otherwise we come back to the trust issue. If we would then look at all of the queries from all other countries, would be a powerful tool, but not used as intended. And that would defeat the purpose of the tool. Lastly, this is also important, is the eco-friendliness. So we on our model, the application runs on 100% renewable energy servers. So that's the last one. But mainly in terms of the trust building and the cooperation, it's openness, it's trustworthiness, and it's privacy that guided us.
Thanks. Are there any questions in the room? Yeah. Do we have another mic? No. Yeah, no. It's, I think for the because it's recorded, it's better.
Hello. Yeah. So on the second point, trustworthiness, right? How do you ensure that whatever output your LLM gives, right, is 100% or maybe what percentage of accuracy it is? How do you measure it, right? Because the output is coming out of LLM. Which tool or which thing you will use to measure its accuracy?
So what we've done in the development process, we've actually worked with actual climate negotiator to come up with ground truth. So we gave certain questions that human negotiator had to answer, and that was our ground truth. And then in LLMs, you have those eval sets, and you get a quantitative score for various, for accuracy, relevance, for instance, and you can actually quantitatively see how close your LLM answer was to the human-guided question. Another point, and that's something that we've also heard from actual negotiators, is the fact that even they don't get it 100% right. And sometimes they are very happy to just have the information in their hand, rather than it being 100% accurate. That's what I mean where the human interaction also comes in, because usually, and Dr. Gosh can probably speak to this, one of the first parts you do in negotiation is also the small talk and verifying your assumptions among each other. And even if the information is right, the LLM made an assessment, and then you just cross it out, basically. And you rework your theory from there.
It can hallucinate as well, right, sometimes?
It can. The likelihood with a RAG system is less than with the preparatory models, but generally, yes.
And follow-up on thing, I mean, when how much of benefit you get, right, in terms of that you were not using the LLMs, right, and now you are using the LLMs, right? What kind of benefit you are getting as compared to whatever investment you are doing on the LLMs, right? Getting the trained or whatever it is, right, in terms of cost.
I mean, so I work for the government. We don't think in return of investment. We think in social benefit, basically. Yeah. So far, I mean, like I said, this is a first prototype, so the costs of using the tool are minimal in this regard. If now all, I don't know how many delegates are there, 10,000s probably at the COP are using it, we would have to do another cost calculation. But I think if the tool works as intended, we would be more than happy without making any promises. Looking at my boss over there, to keep the or like to pay the bills, whatever that may be.
Yes. Yeah,
We're actually funded by the European Union, I'm happy to say, in the program Next Gen EU. So it's actually the European Union we all have to thank for that tool.
Like, I wanted to ask, like, there is so much uncertainty in the geopolitics. Like, world has, every country has different widespread stances on climate. So how do you inculcate that in developing your LLM? So do you consider the political quotient also in it?
I mean, this is a question going into the direction probably of like bias that's there, and that's something that we've also have been taken into considerations. We honestly haven't really found a solution yet. I don't think anyone has found a solution to the bias issue within those LLMs. I mean, what we do is we don't have an internet search or anything. So it's not like the LLM doesn't guess what the stance of the European Union is on climate based on like either the world knowledge or whatever it finds on the internet, but it directly pulls information out of those UNFCCC submission documents. That's the main part, and that's the main source of truth.
Can I pitch in on this? Because I have neither developed the tool nor have I used it yet. So let me use one word, triangulation. I don't think this tool substitutes for common sense. I don't think this tool can substitute for interpersonal relationships. And I don't think this tool can substitute for institutional memory. However, it can make all these three things easier to do, because you're getting the baseline information faster and, if as described, more accurately in terms of the submitted documents. So the NA, the not available, will be if a country has not submitted its NDC, for instance, you're going to get an NA. You're not going to get a research report from a think tank saying this country's NDC ought to be this, right? But what I have observed in real time, this is what plays out. Delegates are stretched, tired, exhausted, and underinformed. So often they will grab each other and say, so what's going on? You know, because they're running from one meeting to the next, and then they might bump into me and say, what's going on this other issue? And I'll say, you tell me. You know, so that is how information is traded, right? So, but the thing is, if you get access to this baseline information faster, why I mentioned institutional memory is often, say a delegate who's negotiated this in 2015 for the Paris Agreement might no longer be part of the delegation team anymore, might have even retired from government. But you can maybe even just text that person and look, I'm getting this information. Does this seem right to you? So it's this ability to use this baseline information for your own sense check, for drawing on institutional memory, right? And to then deepen those interpersonal relationships. One thing I would say, which is why I talked about the private sector, etc. I think this is not the tool, but I think an add-on to this tool, or a separate, is how do we play out different scenarios for, based on this information, now what if a major economy exited the deal 2 years after it's negotiated? What would that mean? Versus what if a different major economy actually delivered on the climate finance commitments they've made? You can play out those different scenarios to evolve your own leeway for giving concessions or holding your red lines. Right? That's not, I understand, that's not the role of this tool, but at least maybe this encourages others to start developing their own add-ons, or in the digital sense of their own plugins for this approach.
Yeah, just very quickly, this is actually the fascinating thing about developing AI tools. So go ahead and do it. Whenever you think about something, there's always a use case around that you can freshly apply, because it hasn't been done yet. And we've been thinking about prediction as well, and there was actually, it just has been a talk from the Foreign Office about that, on that topic. And yes, AI can do that, models can do that. It's not as easy as you might think, but they can actually do this. And what we are doing here is to present the first step, of course. Now we are going to watch now what the most interesting use case will come up. People will come up with and ask us to do as a next phase. Yeah, but certainly you can build on that. And also there will be a feedback from the tool, from that tool, or from the tools available to the processes, actually, what you've described. So next time, when you are relatively certain that you can quickly access the baseline information, then of course the process of negotiation, the human side, will probably change a bit and adopt to that possibility. So we'll see what this process of continuous improvement will get us to.
Thank you. A lot of questions.
No, sir. Actually, how many years data is needed to predict, to develop a model in actual sense?
For prediction, you
Yeah.
mean? We
How
haven't
many
built-
years data?
We haven't built a tool yet that we can evaluate. That is, it is not possible to say. It depends strongly on the use case. I mean, do you mean prediction of climate change or prediction of negotiations? It's very difficult to answer that question.
From farming side, I'm actually speaking from farming side, and in the sector, horticulture sector, we need to develop one AI app like that, and further to predict further forecasting of next 5 years prediction like that. How many years data is actually needed for this?
Well, yeah,
Whether it is
Yeah,
20 years
so,
or 30 years.
so again,
data.
this tool is not for that purpose, but I can tell you, say at CEW, we are developing India's first high-resolution climate resilience atlas. For extreme events, we have data of over the more than 50 years. For precipitation, we have data down to sub-districts, the 4,500 plus sub-districts in India. We are looking at precipitation changes again over the last about 50 years. For heat stress, this data has not been collected in that way for too long, but the tool we are developing is actually for neighborhood scale heat stress, heat and humidity. So even in a city like Delhi, you will have, what is the heat stress of Bharat Mandapam and Supreme Court versus was the heat stress situation in Mayur Vihar. Neighborhood scale allows you to map these into the kind of responses you need. So when you come to horticulture or farming, you'll need a combination of precipitation patterns, heat stress, because trees also and plants also catch fever, as well as extreme events. The more we can keep injecting that data into the evolving models, the more accurate they will become. But minimum half a century is what we think is needed, and that's what we're building. And hopefully in the next 2 or 3 months, we'll make our tool a digital public good for others to use as well.
Great.
I wanted to ask this, in this Negotiate COP tool that you have developed, which models do you use? Do you use open source models or proprietary or some hybrid models? What do you prefer?
So we use two models. The one is for the ETL manager that extracts the smart data. There we use a model that was purely developed for the German administration. Basically, it's an open source project called F13. The Foreign Office is also part of it, and that was developed for the federal government or parts of the federal government. And then for the LLM use, so the portal chat that you see, it is GPT Open OSS for the RAG interaction, exactly, with the 120 billion parameters.
Thank you, the panel, for the interest.
You can just give your name and affiliations as well.
Sure.
So we know who's asking us the question.
Myself, Aparna Joshi. I work in climate education as well, not only climate science, but also climate education. As Dr. Ghosh mentioned, at the COP, my experience was also same. Everyone is tired, super bombardment with lot of information. So the tool will really help. There is one question and a comment. The question is, it was mentioned that the tool uses data from UNFCCC. However, do you also use data from WMO and IPCC? This is the question. And the comment is, as discussed a few minutes ago, if the tool can have some simulation scenario of what if cases, even for the negotiation parameters, it will really help. Of course, one can build, but that might be reinventing few of the things. But if the tool also can accommodate something like this in coming versions, it will be really helpful. Thank you.
Maybe I just quickly answer the question on the
Sure.
on the database. We only use the submission portal. They've been. We thought about also including other data in there, but the more diverse data sources you use, the more complicated the technical architecture needs to be. And in my experience, building these models, it's easier to solve one problem at a time and solve that properly rather than increasing the complexity by I think that there is this potential of AI, because it's such a black box and magic that you just want to throw all of the problems at it and hope that you get an answer. But I think you need to have a more targeted approach on the specific issue, the specific problem that you're trying to solve, and then solve that properly before you move on and try to then come up with other issues or use cases. On the scenario thing, difficult, same thing. As a project manager, my thinking has been making the tool as usable and impactful as possible. I mean, there's always the potential, and working in development cooperation, it's the same thing that we would like to have scenarios for development cooperation outcomes based on evaluations that we've run. But it is a difficult field, and I'm not very sure that LLMs are necessarily the answer to these forecasting scenarios. I think you can use them for strategic foresight, get your thinking going of like what would happen, the scenarios, you can play them out. But I don't think you'll be able to forecast them specifically. Something, and that's the last remark, something where scenarios are very useful in the actual negotiation process is by setting up your, for instance, ChatGPT as your counterpart in negotiation. And there you can actually run through the negotiation yourself and pre-negotiate basically and see how the counterpart would maybe react. And then you get into, or you become more prepared for the actual negotiation. So that's a use case that I've seen in terms of the scenarios that you play out to actually happen. And that's already possible with any kind of, I don't want to name names right now, but any models that are out there.
Sure, thank you. I think I can now grab a few of my students to develop the scenarios as well. Thanks.
It's the last question we can take now.
Are you describing this as AI commons or digital public good? I mean, it's restricted to only the negotiators, the climate negotiators. What is public about it?
It's publicly available. I mean, the use case is with the negotiators, so they are the ones using it, but you can get access to the same information that are on there freely through the website. You don't need to log in, you don't need to register, it's just publicly available, and that's the digital public good about it. That's the AI comments. I know that the Digital Public Good Alliance is somewhere here too. We haven't registered the tool yet, and they have certain guidelines, so it's a preparatory digital public good in that regard, without being licensed.
I see that they are. Yeah, please, you can react.
No, if you want to take the question.
Yeah, I think one more, and then.
One final.
Okay, one final.
Hello panel. So myself Jay Agrawal, and right now I am building a platform, Ganges. It's an AI powered platform which is enabling the international audience to purchase anything from the domestic marketplaces of India. So my question is to the Dr. Arunabha Ghosh. So sir, when competitor offers identical quality and pricing in the global trade, what differentiators create negotiation leverage and long-term advantage from your experience? What builds the priority in the international partnerships? I want to hear that from you.
Sorry, you're selling carbon credits? Is that the tool you're developing?
So right now we are just enabling the local market suppliers and the international audience to purchase anything from the local marketplaces of India.
But the local market is selling carbon credits or any kind of products.
Any kind of product.
Well, I mean, if you have exactly the same product or service at exactly the same price, then it's going to be an inky-pinky-ponky choice. But usually that's not the case, right? And therefore, the more you're able to offer, let's just take this into a use case, right? Rather than, since this is a conversation about climate. Let's say there is a forestry project in Brazil versus a forestry project in Indonesia. You will need verification of whether that project is indeed doing what it is claiming to do. That verification is not going to come from AI, it's going to come from satellites and maybe some degree of ground truthing. On top of that, there is, then there might be other parameters. It's like the buyer of that credit might want to be looking at not just the reduction in emissions or emissions avoided, but extent of social benefit, how many farmers benefited as a result of doing this. And again, you might have different numbers for that. And then there will be different numbers for the price. So I think this is slightly different from the conversation we are having right now, but there are tools that are being developed which are trying to digitize these processes and enable the monitoring, review, and verification of these to embed a lot more both granularity and trust in the system. When that happens, you actually democratize the access to carbon markets much more. But the thought I have while I have the mic is that, you know, we've talked about trust, and I don't belong to the government of India, therefore I cannot speak for it. But I wonder, you know, whether to re-inject trust in an evolving tool like this, shouldn't the EU and India, for instance, be co-developing next versions of tools like this? Then I guess the use cases will also become more specific to the circumstance of negotiators. And then you can also assume that there's a degree of, you know, as President Reagan said, there's trusting but also verification that's happening rather than just assumption of good intention.
Sir,
No, absolutely. That is definitely the case, and that's part of why we're here. The co-development part. I think that is the most important part about the trust, but also the verification. And we would love if someone from the Indian government is here. We would love to also talk after the session. Yeah. So thank you very much for those closing words.
And this maybe brings me to my last question. We have 3 minutes left, and I would like to have a look in the future. So if we meet in 5 years, how would negotiations have changed using AI or digital tools? Would they change or not? So what is your thought on this? Who want to start? Okay.
I can do it quickly. I thought the prediction part would be most interesting to add to that. Will it change negotiations? I believe definitely it will, because just AIs are just so very good in changing the way we work. So this will change, and what I hope is that this will actually this open approach will increase trust between those nations who can rely on that, who can make use of that, because that is one of the counter models against the market solution to have singular models being paid for supplying you with power, basically, and that's hopefully the way the things will change. And yeah, maybe we'll have the prediction part ready then.
This is an AI talk, and we haven't used the buzzword agentic yet. So I think one of the ways to also that might work or will work in the future, and in January, the Harvard University put together a global AI negotiation forum, and I've seen loads of agentic use cases where agents actually prepare. And what I will iterate that the factual part of the preparatory part of the negotiations, and I think that's something that that agents in AI will potentially in 5 years might be able to do, to give them negotiators more time for handshakes at the actual COP.
If you give them the right governance, that's important actually. At the moment, they are very unregulated, so sorry to add this.
And that's absolutely right, because the governance of climate negotiations are going to fundamentally, I think, change over the next 4 or 5 years. So I'm actually thinking of two things. One, I'm going back to, my first COP 15, 16 years, 17 years ago, and negotiators asking me, who was myself very much a novice in the game, do we even have a list of, this negotiating bloc's position? Or do we have even a list of, what they have promised to do on clean energy or what they have promised on finance? Even the most basic information was missing. What's happening now is you have many more sectors of the economy that have a say in what's happening. We weren't discussing maritime emissions or aviation emissions at that time. The nature of climate risks were not the same. So I think all these will start getting reflected in this. And maybe one way could be, even if you're looking at negotiating texts, but draw on other multilateral environmental agreement negotiations. Like what are they saying in the Montreal Protocol on this? What are they saying in the IMO negotiations on this? What are they saying in the ICAO negotiations on this? They're all negotiating texts, official documents, but it gives a better understanding. The other is, and here I'm reflecting on my role as Special Envoy for South Asia. South Asia has landlocked countries like Nepal and Bhutan. It has coastal countries like islands like Sri Lanka, Maldives. When they approach negotiations, they're not just looking at it as, do we have a large delegation or a small delegation? They're also looking at are our lived realities being reflected in the negotiations? And I think democratizing both the information but also the interpretation of that information, which I said earlier, might actually not just help developing country negotiators understand what's happening on the other side, but maybe even help the so-called other side get a better understanding and empathy of what's going on at home in our neighborhood.
Thank you. And with this positive future-looking words, I would like to close this panel. Big thank you to my panelists. Big applause, please. And I'm sure they will stay here around, so in case you have questions, I saw a lot of hands still up there, so please, you can ask them. Thank you for your interest and your participation, and see you around here. Have a great summit. Bye.
That was super interesting. Thank you so much for participating. I want to apologize for any inconvenience you might have in training. This is also my first conference organizing a first panel, so thank you very much. Thank you. So yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity, and it's great